Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
A search and rescue platform developed by the Department of Homeland Security played a key role in coordinating emergency response efforts during July's flooding across Texas, North Carolina, New Mexico, and Vermont, helping responders make faster, more informed decisions in rapidly changing conditions. Here to tell us more about the tool and how it helps first responders is the Community and Infrastructure Resilience Program Manager at the Department of Homeland Security's Science and Technology Directorate, Ron Langhelm. Mr. Langhelm, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really interested to hear about the Search and Rescue Common Operating Platform, or SARCOP. I'll let you call it the acronym that you want from here on in, but tell us, what inspired the development of this tool? What gap was it intending to address?
SARCOP's grown out of a lot of requirements, really acquired, driven, motivated from first responders, from the USAR teams, from that community. On the federal side, as requirements started to kind of roll up into a central place with FEMA headquarters. So as the content rolled up to FEMA, we've started to get a single kind of opinion on things that were required, things that were kind of becoming bigger problems as it related to SAR and the mission in the field. And from there, we began to kind of craft the idea of SARCOP. It was developed as very much a first responder tool in its interim, and then evolved. So with the evolution of it becoming a federal tool set, it has continued to glom on and collect first responder requirements from the field, basically building upon past events, and from there, evolving into new requirements and building out the future. So it's been several years now, and continues to evolve. We're in version 10, so got a few years under our belt. And it's still very much, as I continue to mention, a tool that's been driven by the stakeholders. I think it's a key component, it's key kind of metric of success is that the folks that are providing content and input to defining what it looks like are the ones that are using it. So,
was there a particular incident or disaster that made the need for this shared platform obvious?
That would depend on who you talk to. Everybody's experience with, their one event that kind of pushed them over as individuals. I think that came together with, multiple people and really kind of demonstrated the need for the requirement. Every event has had some kind of tool set with technology. There's been something involved with tracking the status and the progress, whether it was paper maps and pencils and pens, the introduction of GPS technology, and at this point in history, we've got the tools and the technology, we've got the geospatial tools and software to really be able to get us where we are today. So good timing.
Well, you mentioned that this has been driven by the needs of actual first responders. What makes this tool different from what they've had in the past?
USAR has in the past deployed from different geographies of the country, different areas, and deployed to singular events, a Hurricane Katrina event, something larger scaled, something where there's a loss of potential loss of life and the opportunities and abilities to save lives. With that, it is, bringing everybody together into the same environment rather than folks showing up with their own unique software tools and doing things on their own. So that integration, that blending has been the basis of its success.
Do first responders show up with this as an app on their phone? Is that how this works?
Predominantly, yes. The majority of folks using this will be using it as an app on their phone with, again, the technology we've got available to us today. We can hand out a barcode. Folks can scan it and be brought into the system and up and running. There's certainly licensing issues and some other things with the software side of it that make it all work. But very much so, it is a pretty simple and quick to use application. It also follows the business process kind of the USAR mission. So it's doing the things that folks are accustomed to doing. It's doing it with big buttons and the ability to add text type things in, as well as tracking locations, and assigning search operations out to folks. So both the tactical and the operational management side are involved with SARCOP as well.
I'm speaking with Ron Langhelm. He's the Community and Infrastructure Resilience Program Manager at the Department of Homeland Security's Science and Technology Directorate. The very name of this, the Common Operating Platform, means that anybody who logs onto it is going to see the same kinds of data. But tell us a little bit more about what kinds of data that the first responders enter into this and how it helps synchronize operations.
So with multiple teams coming into an area, they are all entering in waypoints, point locations for things that need to be searched. They're entering point locations in for things that are hazardous, whether it's chemicals, objects, those types of things. They're entering in things that have been searched that do not need to be searched again. And in addition, it is tracking locations of teams on the ground. It's providing an incredible amount of content on where people have been to help other people help identify where they're going. And with all of that, content, the amount of time saved on communications back and forth between, people and folks and people in operation centers of where are you, what have you done, all of that is being, kind of expedited with data instead. So from the operation side, somebody can look at the map. They can see from their computer or their phone where folks have been and answer a bunch of their questions without having to bother anybody.
Well, the tool got a real practical application during the recent floods in Texas. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it was used there and how it helped and supported the rescue operations?
So I wasn't part of the operations directly. Certainly our teams were, as well as the USAR teams, but being able to maintain, overall big picture perspective on what's going on with all the teams that are busy enough in the field to, not have time to stop and talk to folks. They're very much in a position of we got to keep moving, we got to keep searching, we got to keep looking, and they're working in environments that it's difficult to stop as well, right? They're trying to stay on their feet and active in what they're doing. So with that, everything that was going on in the field was being identified, was being tracked, was being logged. So we've got the status, we've got the ability to see all of these teams from other places in the country working together and working on a common mission. From the kind of software side of it, we at S&T are working with FEMA and the USAR program. We're working with the FEMA Response Geospatial Office, and then our performer NAPSG is the one doing the actual work, building out the applications. They're the ones doing the program. They're the ones repairing things on the fly, and they are the ones doing just-in-time training for the field teams.
After the end of a rescue operation or a search and rescue operation, does anyone go back and look at all of the data that was entered for a particular event and use it to develop new response plans or approaches or training strategies?
Yes and no. There's an awful lot that happens, in the field that's recorded in after-action reporting. So, not directly from SARCOP, but from a process that's been in place for many, many years. And in addition to that, the individuals are taking their knowledge that they learned on the last event to the next event, and that's kind of that compilation of subject matter expertise that really is the big point that helps folks, make decisions in the field. The environment there is just incredibly dynamic.
Absolutely. Well, the tool is available for free nationwide. What has adoption been like? Are you seeing certain places pick it up with enthusiasm?
Well, it's the official tool set of the Urban Search and Rescue Program. So everything related to ESF 9, Emergency Support Function 9 being search and rescue. All of those folks, if they're being deployed on an ESF 9 mission, that's the intention that everybody's using SARCOP. On the backside, SARCOP, data can be moved around. There can be other data feeds coming into it. So there's a lot of flexibility in what that actually means at the end of the day. But, folks are using it, and we are seeing it, being picked up for all of the large deployments. But once USAR teams are trained with it and have had the experience with it, they're taking it back home, and they're using it on smaller scale events. So the USAR program is built, it's very grassroots, built off of first responders at the local level. And then those teams have affiliations with their geographies, the state teams. So then they deploy as federal teams.
And what's next in the evolution of the tool?
It is continuing to collect, after action reporting content and roll that into requirements and vet those requirements and move those into the application. We definitely will have some smaller updates as things move along. There's also always things that are happening on the fly based on good experiences, bad experiences, and short-term high value needs, but the bigger items will be kind of triaged and rolled into the next versions of SARCOP.
And it's for any kind of incident that requires search and rescue. We mentioned floods, but it could be any other kind of disaster, explosion, earthquake.
It is all hazards, yeah.
All
yeah.
right.
Anytime there's an ESF 9 and urban search and rescue deployment, SARCOP will be involved.
I've been speaking with Ron Langhelm. He's the Community and Infrastructure Resilience Program Manager at the Department of Homeland Security's Science and Technology Directorate. Thank you so much for raising our awareness of this really important tool.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule and on your device. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
What makes a great leader in government? Christine Harada joins WEPA CEO Shane Canfield to reflect on her journey from aerospace engineering to the White House. In this episode, she shares lessons on public-private collaboration, leading with purpose, and why service, not power, should guide leadership.
Hello, and welcome to the Lessons in Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA. Today, I'm joined by Christine Harada, former Senior Advisor at the Office of Federal Procurement Policy within the Office of Management and Budget. Ms. Harada, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
You spent portions of your career working in both the public and the private sector. And from your experience, what makes leadership in the federal sector different than the private sector?
At the highest level, leadership in the public sector is very fundamentally at its core mission-driven. Right? The work is in the service of the public good, and the goals and the programs are frequently long-term, they're systemic, and they're incredibly complex. And success, isn't necessarily measured by quarterly earnings. We don't have that kind of drumbeat, but certainly more by the lasting impact that we have on Americans' lives. What's also unique about public sector is, in my view, the profound sense of history that you feel. And I think certainly I was very aware about the work that I was doing and how it builds on the efforts of those who came before me, and that future generations of leaders also depend on the decisions that were being made today. And that, for me, certainly provided a greater weight of responsibility.
That's a wonderful answer. And I was in the private sector for much of my career, and now WEPA is a nonprofit, and I really relate to what you said about being mission-driven rather than profit-driven. You've got a long-term view, and always at the core of it is serving others.
Yes.
Is there a moment that stands out to you from early in your career that influenced your leadership style later on?
I started out my career as an aerospace engineer, building satellites and airplanes. And when I first entered the workforce, my organization at the time had 120 people. We were a large company, 120 people, 4 women, and I was the only woman of color. I was also the youngest throughout the entire organization. And so, I remember having an experience when I was doing some engineering work. We had a design review, and I had seen some issues with the flight software that I pointed out. At the time, they're like, maybe it's not really that big of a concern. I was like, but in my heart, I knew that the issue was real and stayed with it. And sure enough, a few weeks later, that topic came up again, and we addressed it. Turns out my concern did indeed prove to be valid. And so it's just one of those experiences that really sank into me around ensuring that I am listening to everybody, period, end of story, within the organization, really thinking through about how do we take into consideration opinions from all different spectra. As a third-generation Japanese American, right, I was raised to be humble, keep your head down, and work hard, etc. But at times, leadership also requires you to speak up, do so politely, with courage, etc. Even though you may be the only voice in your room, but certainly trust your voice. It also really helped shape my belief around diversity. DEI programs right now are viewed in a negative light. We're all mosaics, and they become better because you have those different experiences. And that's really stayed with me throughout the entirety of my career.
The diversity issue is a really big one. Coming from the insurance industry, that's an industry which is working on that. It's really a diversity of viewpoint and perspective and experiences that does influence your business. And more diverse employee bases absolutely helps. Was there a time in your federal career, perhaps when you were at OMB, that you faced what you consider a real challenge? And how did you overcome it?
One moment that really stands out in particular was when I was serving as the Federal Chief Sustainability Officer during the Obama administration. We had set, like many administrations, had set some really ambitious goals, very, very, very ambitious goals around how do we think about making the federal government's operations much more sustainable. But the challenge wasn't so much about the scale or the technical capacity of the organization. A lot of it was really centered around the funding. We overcame this largely by being very strategic, helping out with blocking and tackling with the variety of legal issues or legal questions that might have come up, like how do we address this? Certainly in the federal government, you're more often leading through influence as opposed to pure form authority, and that you really need to listen deeply, communicate clearly with folks, building out those coalitions and engaging with your stakeholders. And I know many folks in government speak like that, but that is the truth.
As someone who's spent time in both the federal and the private sectors, what makes the relationship between the two sectors important?
Certainly, it's an absolutely essential partnership, and I would add on to that like nonprofits or philanthropic organizations. As I mentioned before, I'm Japanese American, and in Japan there's a symbol for thunder, which looks like 3 arrows pointing around each other in a circular pattern, kind of to represent the swirl, if you will, of clouds. And that's kind of how I view the relationship between the government, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector. The government frequently sets the vision, the policy, the direction, but of course it's the private sector that brings the capital, the innovation, the skill set, the capabilities, et cetera, to be able to execute. Partnering with that, of course, are the nonprofits who may be supporting the surrounding society. Public-private collaboration is not just about contracts or compliance, but it's also about figuring out what's your shared purpose. That's when real transformation can and does actually happen.
In life insurance, there's a concept, lifetime value, where bringing a new insured in costs a lot more money than the amount of premium. And so when you talk to commercial carriers, it's a similar kind of thing. You need to bring them into the concept that they're going to be with us 20 years, and after 5 years, you can ride through that. But it's a concept that isn't easy for commercial businesses to understand. That's a partnership too. Very, very similar. What advice would you give to somebody aspiring to become a leader in government?
There are 3 things, right? So firstly, around leadership in government, you want to make sure that you're leading with purpose. You want to stay grounded in your values, and don't underestimate the power of relationships. Remember why you entered public service in the first place, and that'll help carry you through some of the inevitable challenges that you're going to face. Making sure that you are also investing in relationships. In government, you rarely have full control, and I think this is, in my view, more important in government than perhaps in the private sector. You are frequently leading through influence. You are collaborating with very different parties who frequently have very different agendas than you do. And so building that trust, investing in building that trust and planting those seeds earlier and along the way in your career, I think is absolutely critical. And certainly last but not least, I would say, don't feel that you have to have it all figured out on day one. Absolutely stay open to the unexpected, say yes to the opportunities that stretch you, and know that you can lead from wherever you are. It's not just about position or hierarchy, it's about the impact that you can have.
What wonderful advice, especially in today's world, which is a little topsy-turvy. Who is one person, someone you know personally, or perhaps someone well-known, that's impacted your leadership style?
The leaders that particularly stand out for me are Colin Powell, a woman named Carla Harris, who was a managing director in investment banking, and then last but not least would be my father. Starting with perhaps the more famous one, Colin Powell. I read his biography, loved his perspectives and the rules of leadership that have been particularly influential for me, right? So get mad, then get over it, share the credit, perpetual optimism, a force multiplier, things of that nature. And hearing his story was certainly very inspirational for me. And so I certainly very much look up to him and as a role model. The second person that I mentioned is a woman named Carla Harris. She's an African-American woman, became a managing director at an investment bank in the 80s, at a time when there were not that many women of color in investment banking in New York. And so she's published a book called Her Pearls of Wisdom. It's one of her trademarks. She always wore a pearl necklace, and she has pearls of wisdom around how can you be authentic and build relationships to be successful in super challenging environments. And she had a lot of guidance on the importance of finding sponsors and mentors. And certainly last but not least, my father is really my why for I do a lot of the work that I do in the public sector. He started out life, like many other, immigrant kids in poverty. He was a strawberry farm laborer. Japanese Americans at the time were not allowed to own the land, so we worked the land. He grew up in that kind of environment. And I just think it's absolutely neat that someone who came really he was dirt poor, to say it, and his daughter ended up working in the White House twice. It's quite the American dream, and I would very much like to have that opportunity available for other people as well.
Well, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Christine, thank you very much for your time today and all of these learnings. It's really good, impactful. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I'm Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA. Until next time on Lessons in Leadership.
Find the full podcast and future episodes of Lessons in Leadership on the Federal News Network app and anywhere you enjoy your podcasts.